They spoke of loss, of lone lines, of how fear isolates. Chima leaned closer, his voice dropping. He praised her strength, her difference. Adana allowed herself to smile faintly. The moment balanced perfectly between trust and danger. Outside, the village slept, unaware that its fate hovered inside a small hut at the edge of the dark. Then Chima asked the question. His tone was casual, almost playful, as if sharing a riddle. "Have you ever wondered," he said, "how close life and death truly are?" Adana met his gaze, heart steady. She nodded, saying nothing. He took her silence as invitation. The air shifted. Chima began to whistle, softly at first, the sound threading through the room like smoke. Adana felt the warning rise in her spine. From the shadows, something stirred. The lamp flickered. Scales glistened where skin should have been. The truth uncoiled itself at last. Before fear could take her voice, Adana moved. She drew the flute and played. The sound cut through the whistling, sharp and commanding, vibrating with power older than fear. The snake froze. Mid-motion, confusion rippling through its body. Chima staggered back, disbelief cracking his control. He had never imagined resistance, never imagined reversal. The serpent turned slowly, deliberately away from Adana and toward its master. Chima's confidence shattered. He pleaded, shouted, reached for control that no longer answered him. The snake tightened, obedience rewritten by sacred sound. Adana stood firm, eyes cold, breath steady. This was the moment she had waited for. Not revenge, but balance. As the struggle ended, silence rushed back into the hut, heavy and final. The danger that haunted Yuka collapsed into stillness. Adana lowered the flute, her task complete. Dawn would bring truth. The village would awaken to an ending it never suspected and a lesson it would never forget. By sunrise, the village felt it before anyone spoke it aloud. Something had ended. The air was lighter, birds louder, as if Yuka itself exhaled. People stepped out cautiously, expecting another body, another cry. Instead, they found Chima's hut open and silent. Fear shifted shape, turning from dread into confusion, then into gathering courage that pulled villagers toward the square. The body lay there uncovered, stiff with death, the marks clear on his neck for all to see. Nearby, the serpent lay lifeless, its secret revealed without words. Gasps rippled through the crowd, disbelief colliding with memory. Mothers clutched daughters. Elders stared at the ground. The admired builder, the protector, the smile that reassured them he was the monster they had fed with trust. Chief Obeya revived last, his steps slow, eyes heavy. He did not speak immediately. He looked from Chima's body to the snake, then to the people he was sworn to lead. The truth pressed down on him like a physical weight. Leadership, he realized, was not only about calming fear, but about naming it when it hides behind familiarity. Adana stepped forward, calm but resolute. She told them why she came, speaking of her friend taken by the same marks, the same deception. She explained the oracle, the flute, the waiting, no embellishment, no triumph. Justice, she made clear, was not vengeance. It was interruption, the ending of a pattern before it claimed more lives. Murmurs spread, then quieted. Women who once laughed at Chima's words wept openly. Some fell to their knees, shaken by how close they had come to death without knowing it. Shame mingled with relief. The village mourned not only the dead, but its blindness. Trust, once broken, does not shatter cleanly. It leaves edges. Chief Obi ordered Chima buried outside the village boundary, without ceremony. The serpent was burned, its ashes scattered where no foot would tread. Rituals followed, not to chase spirits, but to cleanse memory. Fires burned through the night, and stories were told, true ones this time, stripped of admiration and illusion. In the days that followed, Yuka changed. Women walked together again, cautious but alive. Men spoke less and listened more. Elders taught children not just obedience, but discernment. Charm was no longer praised without question. The lesson cut deep. Danger does not always roar. Sometimes it smiles, helps, and waits. Adana prepared to leave quietly, her task complete. Chief Obi asked her to stay, to be honored, to lead. She declined gently. Her work was done here. Justice does not linger where it has already spoken. Before dawn, she visited her friend's resting place, placing the flute beside the grave for a moment before reclaiming it. Some tools are meant to travel. As she walked away from Yuka, the village watched her go, understanding that peace had been restored by someone willing to stand alone long enough. The path behind her closed slowly, but firmly. Yuka would remember not the monster's name, but the cost of ignoring quiet warnings. The sun climbed higher, and life resumed, altered but intact. Fear no longer ruled the nights. Memory, deed, and memory, when honored, guards better than walls. Weeks passed and Yuka settled into a new rhythm, one shaped by awareness rather than fear. The nights grew quieter, not because danger had vanished from the world, but because it had been named once, clearly, and survived. People slept with doors open again, not out of innocence, but out of trust, rebuilt carefully, like clay pressed and fired slowly. The elders met often, revising customs that had gone unquestioned for generations. They spoke about how easily charm had replaced character, how usefulness had blinded them to warning signs. Younger voices were invited into those meetings now. Listening became a shared responsibility. The village learned that safety is not a gift from leaders alone, but a practice sustained by everyone. Women reclaimed spaces that fear had stolen. The stream filled again with conversation and laughter. Fields echoed with songs. Yet none of it was careless. Each smile carried memory behind it, an understanding that vigilance and joy must coexist. Survival had taught them that children ask questions adults once avoided. Why did no one see it sooner? Why did everyone trust him? Mothers answered honestly, saying that evil rarely arrives announcing itself. It borrows familiar faces. It learns the rules so it can bend them. These lessons became part of bedtime stories, warnings folded into warmth. Chief Obi carried the burden quietly. Leadership weighed differently now. He visited the families of the victims often, not to explain, but to listen. Apologies do not undo loss, but presence honors it. In private moments, he wondered how many other dangers had passed unnoticed in his years of rule. The thought humbled him more than any public shame could have. Far from Yuka, Adana walked steadily, guided by instinct rather than destination. She did not think of herself as a hero. She thought of herself as a witness. There were other villages, other whispers, other patterns that repeated because no one stopped them. The flute remained with her, wrapped carefully, its power respected but never romanticized. Tools are dangerous when loved too much. She stopped briefly in a riverside town, helping a woman whose sister had vanished under strange circumstances. Not every story ended with revelation. Some ended with acceptance, with grief named instead of solved. Adana learned that justice sometimes means uncovering truth, and sometimes it means helping people live with unanswered questions. Back in Yuka, the seasons turned. Harvest came, then rain. The memory of Chima faded into something shapeless, stripped of fascination. His name was no longer spoken. Monsters do not deserve legends. The victims, however, were remembered fully. Their names were carved into wood near the meeting tree, a quiet promise that they would not be erased. A new tradition formed without announcement. When something felt wrong, people spoke, not loudly at first, but early. Discomfort was no longer dismissed as rudeness or suspicion. It was treated as information. That change saved lives in ways no one could count. One evening, long after Adana had gone, a young girl played a simple tune on a handmade flute near the fields. It was not the sacred instrument, just red and breath. Still, the sound drifted across Yuka, gently, unafraid. Elders paused to listen. Some smiled, some closed their eyes. The night held no secrets it needed to protect anymore. And though danger would always exist beyond the boundaries of the village, Yuka understood something it never had before. Vigilance is not fear. It is care, practiced daily. It is the courage to question what feels comfortable. It is the willingness to see clearly, even when the truth threatens peace. Somewhere down the road, Adana continued walking, unseen and uncelebrated, exactly as she preferred. Villages behind her slept more safely. Villages ahead did not yet know her name. That was fine. The work was never about being known. It was about making sure others lived long enough to tell their own stories. The world moved forward, scarred but wiser. Long after Adana had vanished into the wider world, the story of Yucca continued to shape those who remained, not as a tale told loudly, but as a quiet influence on decisions made every day. The village no longer rushed to explain away discomfort. When someone felt unease, others listened. Silence was no longer mistaken for peace. Io, one of the younger hunters, became known for asking difficult questions. He remembered how Isali admiration had blinded them all. Whenever a newcomer arrived with too polished manners or generous promises, Io watched carefully. He did not accuse, but he observed. The elders once would have called him troublesome. Now, they called him wise. The meeting tree became more than a gathering place. It became a place of confession. People spoke of small wrongs before they grew teeth. Jealousies, resentments, quiet cruelties, things once hidden for the sake of harmony were now brought into light early. The village learned that harmony built on silence rots from inside. Mothers raised their daughters differently. Strength was no longer taught as endurance alone, but as awareness. They learned that politeness is not obedience, and kindness does not require sacrifice of safety. Sons were taught the same lessons. Respect became action, not performance. These changes were slow, uneven, but real. Chief Obi A.G. Responsibility marked him more deeply than time. Yet there was peace in his fatigue. He had learned that leadership was not about being unquestioned, but about being corrected. He welcomed disagreement now, knowing that certainty had nearly destroyed them once. Sometimes, at night, he dreamed of Chima not as the man he pretended to be, but as the emptiness behind the mask. Those dreams reminded him how Isli people mistake familiarity for truth. He woke from them grateful for daylight, for voices, for the courage to speak. Far away, Adana paused in her travels more often. Each village carried echoes of the same problem, wearing different faces. She did not intervene everywhere. She listened first. Some places were not ready to see. Forcing truth too early could be as dangerous as ignoring it. Timing, she knew, was everything. In one town, she refused to act, leaving quietly before suspicion turned violent. In another, she stayed long enough to guide a woman toward escape rather than confrontation. Justice took many shapes. None of them were simple. The flute grew heavier with Timnot in weight, but in meaning. Adana used it less. She relied more on people choosing to see for themselves. Power that replaces judgment weakens it. Power that supports awareness strengthens it. This balance became her guiding rule. Back in Yucca, a boy asked his grandmother why bad things happened even in good places. She answered honestly, "Because goodness is not a shield," she said. "It is a choice we must keep making." The boy thought about that for a long time. The village prospered quietly. Crops grew well, trade improved. But no one credited blessings to purity or favor. They credited them to effort, cooperation, and learning from pain instead of burying it. Years later, a traveler mentioned a woman with a flute who helped villages sleep easier. The story sounded almost unreal. The elders listened politely, then let it pass. Legends were dangerous. Truth mattered more. Still, sometimes, when the wind moved just right through the trees at night, it sounded almost like music. Not a warning, not a spell, just a reminder that awareness, once awakened, never truly goes silent. Stories have a way of arriving before people do. By the time Adana reached the lowlands beyond the river, whispers had already shaped expectations. Some spoke of a healer. Others warned of a troublemaker who asked questions that unsettled peace. Adana accepted both reputations without correcting either. Truth, she had learned, moves best when unannounced. The lowland settlements were larger than Yucca, louder, layered with politics and trade. Danger hid more skillfully there, buried under rules and alliances. People were polite, efficient, and careful not to look too closely at one another. Adana felt the familiar tension immediately. This place did not scream, Ite, ta. She stayed first with a family of traders who argued constantly but never listened. The wife complained of sleeplessness, of unease she could not name. The husband dismissed it as nerves. Adana did not mention flutes or oracles. She asked questions instead. Who controlled what? Who benefited from silence? Who was protected when problems disappeared quietly? Patterns emerged, slower and less dramatic than in Yucca, but no less dangerous. Workers vanished. Accidents happened conveniently. Blame dissolved into paperwork and shrugs. Monsters here did not wear smiles. They wore authority. Adana understood then that her role was changing. Direct confrontation would fail here. Power defended itself too well. She began teaching instead subtly, patiently. She spoke to women at wells, to boys running errands, to elders who still remembered when decisions were shared. She planted questions like seeds, trusting time to do the rest. Resistance came quickly. A local official warned her to stop steering Unias. His voice was calm, his threat indirect. Adana nodded politely and continued exactly as before. Fear had taught her many things, but obedience was not one of them. At night, she played the flute only once, quietly, not as a weapon, but as a test. The sound carried differently here, bouncing off stone and walls. It revealed tension rather than releasing it. She put the instrument away again, understanding that this place required exposure, not interruption. Meanwhile, far away, Yuka felt the echo of her absence, not as loss, but as independence. The village no longer needed a guardian figure. What remained was habit listening, questioning, acting early. That habit spread outward through trade routes and marriages. Awareness traveled faster than fear ever had. In the lowlands, change came slowly, unevenly. A clerk refused to falsify records. A woman gathered others to demand answers. A disappearance was noticed instead of ignored. Small acts, barely visible, but cumulative. Systems depend on apathy. Once attention appears, they weaken. Adana watched from the edges, intervening rarely. When danger pressed too close, she moved on. Staying too long risked becoming a symbol, and symbols attract destruction. She preferred movement, adaptability, the quiet work of influence. One evening, as she prepared to leave again, a young man approached her. "It simply you made us notice. Nothing more. No gratitude. No fear. Just recognition." It was a node. She crossed the river at dawn, heading toward hills where stories had not yet formed. Behind her, the lowlands continued adjusting, resisting, learning. Ahead of her, uncertainty waited. The echo moved on. The hills were colder, quieter, shaped by distance and isolation. Villages clung to slopes like afterthoughts, connected by narrow paths and shared hardship. Here, stories lasted longer because people did. Memory traveled by voice, not by trade. Adana felt the difference immediately. This was a place where the past spoke loudly. She was welcomed cautiously, offered food, offered silence. The elders asked few questions, but they watched closely. In communities like this, survival depended on noticing small changes. Adana respected that. She listened more than she spoke, learning names, histories, old disagreements that never quite healed. The danger here was subtle but heavy. No bodies appeared. No screams broke the night. Instead, there was controltite, inherited, unquestioned. Certain families decided who married whom, who farmed which land, who spoke in meetings. Disobedience was punished quietly, through exclusion. People learned early that safety came from compliance. Adana saw the pattern within days. This was not a single predator. It was a system taught and protected across generations. Confrontation would fracture the village, perhaps violently. Exposure required patience that stretched beyond individual lives. She began with stories. At night, by firelight, she shared tales from other places, not naming them as truth, letting listeners decide. Stories of villages that mistook control for order, of peace built on silence, of how those arrangements eventually collapsed under their own weight. Children listened openly. Adults pretended not to. The elders frowned but did not stop her. Stories were not crimes, yet seeds were being planted. Over time, questions followed, small ones at first. Why must land pass only one way? Why are some voices never heard? Why fear disagreement? Adana answered gently, always returning the questions back to them. Ownership of awareness mattered more than instruction. Resistance hardened. One night, an elder warned her to leave before her words caused trouble. Adana nodded, agreeing. Trouble was already there. She stayed a little longer. The flute remained silent. This was not a place for interruption. It was a place for inheritance ideas, passed down until they could not be uprooted easily. Adana understood that some change would not be visible in her lifetime. Eventually, she left. As promised, no dramatic confrontation followed. No immediate transformation. Just a slow shift already underway. Years later, long after Adana's path moved elsewhere, a girl from those hills refused a forced marriage. She cited a story she once heard by firelight. Others supported her, quietly at first. The decision held, a precedent formed. In another season, land was redistributed after a dispute because someone asked, "Why must it always be this way?" The question echoed longer than any command ever had. Back in Yucca, elders heard of these changes, distantly. Through travelers, they recognized the pattern. Awareness, once learned, teaches itself forward. It does not need its source. Adana continued walking, older now, slower perhaps, but no less attentive. She no longer searched for danger alone. She searched for readiness, the moment when people were prepared to see without being forced. The work was never about stopping monsters. Monsters adapt, systems mutate. The real task was inheritance-making awareness, something passed down like language, like memory, like warning. That was how change survived. Age arrived quietly for Adana. Not as weakness, but as narrowing. She chose her paths more carefully now, avoided places that demanded speed instead of clarity. Her hair silvered. Her steps slowed. Still, her eyes missed nothing. Awareness does not fade with the body. It sharpens. She returned to no village twice. Returning creates authority, and authority invites dependency. Instead, she moved in widening circles, watching the effects of earlier work ripple outward. She saw children grow into adults who questioned what their parents never dared. She saw traditions bend, then quietly break. She also saw resistance harden elsewhere, evolving into subtler forms. The world learned, but so did its dangers. One winter evening, Adana stopped walking, not from illness, not from injury, from recognition. In a town built at the crossroads of three regions, she felt it instantly, the familiar hum beneath order. The same pattern she had interrupted years ago, refined now, buried deeper. No missing girls. No blood, no monsters in the night. Just stability that depended on certain people never being heard again. This place celebrated justice loudly. Councils met, laws were praised. Everything looked right. That was what terrified her. She stayed longer than usual, listening. The problem revealed itself slowly. People who challenged decisions were labeled unstable. Those who insisted on answers were isolated socially, economically, quietly erased. No violence was needed. The system consumed dissent, gently, politely, and completely. Adana realized the truth. Then, sharper than any she had faced before, the danger had learned. It no longer hid behind individuals. It no longer needed charm or fear. It lived inside procedures, consensus, and rules people trusted blindly. There was no single figure to expose. No flute could interrupt it. This was not a monster to stop. It was a lesson to leave behind. That night, Adana did something she had never done before. She spoke publicly. At a council gathering, she stood and told her story, not of Yucca, not of villages or flutes, but of patterns. She named them clearly. How systems protect themselves. How silence is rewarded. How people confuse order with safety. Her voice was calm, steady, impossible to dismiss as hysteria. The room listened politely. Then they thanked her and ignored her. No threats followed, no confrontation. Just dismissal. She was old. She was passing through. She did not understand their complexities. The meeting moved on. Adana walked out, knowing something final had happened. For the first time, she could not intervene. So she did the only thing left. She left everything behind. The flute was placed in the center of the crossroads before dawn, wrapped carefully, unguarded. No warning, no explanation. She walked away without it, lighter than she had been in decades. By midday, someone found it. By nightfall, everyone knew. Arguments erupted. What was it? Who left it? Why now? Some demanded it be destroyed. Others insisted it be studied. Rumors spread faster than truth ever had. People who had never questioned anything suddenly disagreed violently. Within weeks, the town fractured not into chaos, but into scrutiny. Records were re-examined. Decisions reopened. Alliances strained. The system stumbled under a tension it had never faced. Adana did not witness this. She died quietly on a road outside the town, unnamed, unnoticed, before the changes fully unfolded. That was the shock. No story prepared for. There was no final victory. No celebration, no protector left standing. Only a question dropped into the world like a stone into still water. And the ripples did the rest. Years later, children argued over whether Adana was real or invented. Some claimed the flute caused everything. Others said the people did. Elders disagreed. That disagreement itself became the proof, because the final lesson was never about stopping evil. It was about ensuring no one waited for a savior again.